cloudy, wishing me heart it was Sunday. Drinking wine and beer all the week, time for whiskey on a Sunday.
Well, hello everyone. You are all very much indeed welcome to be joining me for this pre-recorded edition of my usually live Instagram series, Whiskey on a Sunday, with me, Sam for All. So, spring is now officially in the air and we continue to celebrate Ireland and all its majesty, including, of course, its incredible water of life. Of course, I'm talking about Ishkabaha itself, Irish whiskey. So today, I'm showcasing and tasting a very tasty Irish dram indeed, and one that I find is fitting given that yesterday was the first day of spring. But before we dive in, as always, I do need to ask anyone watching who may not yet be of legal age where they live to enjoy or consume alcohol products that they now sign off and say goodbye. All right, so for everyone else, let's take a virtual walk back in Irish time and talk about and taste a bit of what Irish whiskey would have been like in the 19th century. This, folks, is Redbreast 12 Irish Pot Still Whiskey. Before we talk about the brand itself, though, let's quickly talk about pot still whiskey, also known as pure pot whiskey. So this style is the quote-unquote traditional method of how Irish whiskey was long ago produced. Just a gentle reminder, when we talk about pot still or pure pot still, what that means is that the whiskey has been made with a minimum of 30% malted barley and a minimum of 30% unmalted barley, right? So those are minimums, so minimum 30 and 30. It can, according to Irish law or Irish specification, also have up to 5% of other cereal grains, but that's not a requirement. You technically can have a 50-50 split if you want and still be pot still or pure pot still whiskey. Single in the term means it all came from one distillery. All right, so back to Redbreast itself. Now the name Redbreast dates back to 1912. That's when we know that that was the first recorded use of the name Redbreast. And it's named in honor of Robin Redbreast. Not so much of a shocker, considering when you see the bottle, there's a robin on it. And Robin Redbreast is the European variety of robin that we see here in North America, and it's very synonymous with spring. So that's why it's apropos to do it today. The creators behind Redbreast were also avid bird enthusiasts, and they believed that their product, when held up to proper light, had a bit of a rosy, robiny breast hue to it. I haven't been able to replicate that in years of trying it, but hey, they made it, so we're going to go with what they said. Now, I mentioned that the first written record of Redbreast dates back to 1912, but despite that, it's thought that the purveyors of Redbreast, the creators, that they had been selling the recipe, or at least something very, very similar to this recipe, as far back as the 1870s under the name Gilbey's JJ Liquor. So of course, that now leads us to the question, okay, Paul, who created the brand? And what's that JJ mean that you're talking about in those early bottles? Well, Redbreast was created by Dublin wine and spirits merchants and brothers, Walter and Alfred Gilbey, W&A. And they originally hailed from London, but they relocated to Dublin. Now in the 1860s, the brothers decided to dip their toe into the realm of Irish whiskey by buying stocks of Jameson Irish whiskey, and then they in turn were aging it for 6 years in their own sourced sherry casks. So yes, folks, W&A Gilbey were essentially, and honestly, were bonders. They did not make their own whiskey. So that method and that model of bonding continued for Gilbey right through to the tail end of the 20th century, actually. Now, as I've mentioned in prior episodes, despite Irish whiskey being a global giant in the late 18th and practically all of the 19th century, several factors such as prohibition in the US, Irish independence with the Free State being formed, as well as several other factors, all impacted the Irish whiskey industry, and by 1973, really only one consolidated distillery remained, what we know today as Irish Distillers Limited, which was a consortium of Bushmills, Jameson, Middleton, and Powers. So that's kind of what happened to Irish whiskey. Now, W&A Gilby somehow managed to remain one of the very last Irish whiskey bonders until 1985. So that's pretty good for them. It shows the strength of their brands and their products. But in 1985, they closed, and as such, the Redbreast brand ceased to be produced. I know what you're thinking. I can hear you virtually through the airwaves. But Paul, we see it in front of you today. What happened? Great catch. Gold star to all of you for that. In 1986, 1 year after W&A Gilby folded, the Jameson division of IDL bought the rights to the Redbreast name and the recipe. And then in 1991, IDL, Irish Distributors Limited, they resurrected the brand, and stayed true to the original recipe, and also now providing the marketplace with one of only 2 pure pot Irish whiskeys that were out there. And I believe that's still the case today, that there is only Redbreast Pure Pot and one other Irish whiskey Pure Pot brand. All right, so let's dive into the whiskey itself, because I know you're all very thirsty. 40% alcohol by volume, and when we look at it, there's a little bit of a rose gold tinge to it. Don't know that I would go robin breast, but hey, again, I didn't create it, so yeah. This is a triple distilled Irish whiskey, and the estimated split, again, talked earlier about pure pot, about minimums of malted and unmalted barley. This is believed to be a 50-50 split. 50% malted, 50% unmalted barley in here, with the minimum age of any of the whiskeys that are being used in the recipe to be minimum 12 years of age, right? When we see the age statement on a bottle, that is the indication of the youngest whiskey that's being used in there. No doubt there is older whiskeys in here, but that's what the 12 means. It's been aged in both former bourbon casks as well as former Oloroso sherry casks. All right, so now we're going to dive in. So we get to know our whiskey as always, right? 1, 2, 3. Hello there. Nice to meet you. I hope you smell delicious. So now that our nose is fully acclimatized and we're ready to dive in and get all these great senses, let's see what we do smell. So, wow. For me, right away, nutty. Cashew pops out right away every time with Redbreast for me. Then I'm getting some sweet notes, some ripe citrus peel, candied orange, baked apple, stewed apple, and a little bit of tropical, little grilled pineapple. I also find some grassy notes, some fresh cut hay, fresh mowed grass, and some floral honey coming through. Buttery on the nose, with shortbread and fruitcake, as well as standalone dried fruit. So think raisin, fig, maybe some sultanas. And then I get a little spice, some ginger, some peppercorn, all rounded out with a bit of a cream soda nose to it. Caramel, definitely some brown sugar in there, and I get a little vanilla. So, all in all, folks, there's a lot for me going on in the nose here. Okay, nose is great. What about the taste? Sláinte. Right, we always want to coat the 5 flavor receptors that we have in the mouth. Give it a swish and a swirl. So sweet citrus pops straight out for me. Orange and lime, very ripe orange, ripe lime. And then I get that nuttiness. It makes way for some cashew and some almond. Sweet fruit now, ripe apricot, pineapple, peaches and cream come through. Getting a little honey, sherry notes, definitely sherry notes coming through. Dried fruit, fig, raisin, fruitcake again, some white pepper, some ginger, a little nutmeg, clove, cinnamon, little treacle like molasses almost, and a little toasty oak just at the back. Again, there's a lot in the flavor department going on here. For me, I find the finish to be long and creamy with some custard and ginger, cinnamon, some apples, and some sherry lingering. In my opinion, folks, it's quite lovely. But again, that's for me. I find it quite lovely. So as I mentioned earlier, experts all seem to agree that this expression, this Redbreast 12 expression, is about as close as there is to what Irish pot still whiskey would have tasted like back in the 19th century. And if indeed that is true, then for me it's very easy to see why and how Irish whiskey was indeed the king of the world back then. A very appealing profile. For me, it strikes many different flavor and aroma ranges, all still while managing to be soft and light. Okay, so if you like what you've heard and you're enticed to try and find a bottle for yourself, in Ontario, it is widely available at the LCBO. Stock number 636845, $79.95 per 750 milliliter bottle. Fair value, in my opinion, given that it does have an age statement of minimum 12 and for what it offers. In Quebec, you can find it fairly easily at the SAQ, stock number 102-35663, $79 flat in Quebec, again for a 750 milliliter bottle. And in the US, it's a bit hodgy-podgy. I'm seeing it online for anywhere between $45 USD right through to $60 USD across different websites, so you may want to shop around to find a deal there. Alrighty, well folks, that is indeed a wrap for this week's edition of Whiskey on a Sunday with me, Some for All. I want to sincerely thank you, as always, for spending some time with me. I do hope you've enjoyed our time together today and also my look at Redbreast 12. Just a reminder, next week I will indeed be back live on Instagram, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to have a look and a taste of the first new Irish whiskey that I tasted on my 2018 trip to the Emerald Isle. Until then, everyone, please continue to stay safe out there, be well, and Sláinte from Some for All.